Hello, and welcome back to another episode of DC Daily. And today, well, let's talk about how Warner Brothers may or may not be learning from their past mistakes, especially with regards to DC. Now, this is something we have discussed earlier on DCU Daily. You can go back a couple episodes and find us talking about that whole Aquaman article that came out. And in addition to just mentioning of some behind the scenes drama on that movie, this Aquaman 2 that's coming out later this year, that article sort of touched upon a few other nuggets from the world of DC and Warner Brothers, including things like some insiders on the Warner Brothers lot believe that Universal might buy out Warner Brothers in a couple of years time, and regardless of where DC ends up under whose ownership, they have to make DC work. To do that, obviously, David Zaslav has set up a DC Studios, which is the first time ever that DC has kind of had their production centralized under a studio, a dedicated studio. Because before this, they were always part of Warner Brothers Pictures, and the properties kind of got divvied up between the various creatives on the lot. That's when Christopher Nolan did his Dark Knight trilogy. Then they brought in Zack Snyder to do Man of Steel, the whole DCEU, different ownerships under AT&T. Before that, Time Warner, and then since AT&T, of course, Discovery comes in, and even like New Line Cinemas, which is like a sister studio to Warner Brothers Pictures. They've released like the Shazam movies and Black Adam. So like there's a lot of um, pieces of the pie being divided up for consumption, and that's something that James Gunn earlier this year criticized, or late last year when they made the new DCU announcement. He was like, they've sort of carelessly handed out the reins to various DC properties to just about anybody who wanted it. And regardless of whether the results were $1 billion franchise like the Dark Knight trilogy, or underperforming movies like a lot of the DCEU films, I think now we're going in a very cohesive direction. But that Aquaman article had a couple of sentences that might be speaking to the contrary. And even though we have sort of touched upon this and sort of tried to debunk it, I wanted to kind of do that, kind of dive into it a little bit further today. So John, I wanted to ask you, like in this article, which I think this was a Variety exclusive, if I remember
Yes,
correctly,
variety.
and in there they mentioned the fact that, or not the fact, but like they just mentioned it in a couple of sentences. It was like just one paragraph buried in the middle of this article, almost like a tangent, where they talked about that the executives, the two co-leads of Max, including I think Casey Bloy, I forget the name of the other person, but like there's two leads over at Max. It used to be HBO Max, now it's
Right.
just Max. So HBO and all of that included. Um, they are sort of collaborating with James Gunn and Peter Safran, who are the co-leads over at DC Studios, to kind of work on the Penguin show, which is part of the Batman universe, like the Matt Reeves Batman
Right.
universe. And that seems to be an indication that, unlike at Marvel Studios, where Kevin Feige and his team basically have all the creative control over production of the movies and the TV shows, and Disney Plus as a streaming service, they simply are the distributor, meaning that they will make the show. Meaning that Marvel Studios will make She-Hulk, or they'll make Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or the Loki seasons, or the new Daredevil show, and they will just then give it to Disney Plus to put out. You know, but Disney Plus doesn't really, as a service, as a business unit, have a lot of creative say in that process. Whereas here, this article implied that, well, there seems to be creative collaboration going on. And of course, we know there's a history at Warner Brothers of doing things by committee when it comes to DC, and that all not always, being the best thing for the franchise. In fact, one of the reasons why people are looking forward to this new era of DC under James Gunn and Peter Safran is because they're thinking, hey, look, we're going to have this unified voice, kind of like, James Gunn could be the Kevin Feige of DC and lead them in this like one grand vision without having this by committee approach. Whereas this, these couple of sentences in this Variety article sort of contradict that. They say this Penguin show seems to be, so far, a seamless collaboration, but a collaboration nonetheless between the leads of Max and the leads of DC Studios. And then there's been speculation since, like, hey, does that mean that James Gunn doesn't actually have as much control over all the DC properties as we have been led to believe, since he was given the role by David Zaslav? So what do you think about like that dynamic? Like, how much of this do you buy into? do you even think this is a problem? Because, like, for example, the Penguin show was commissioned before James Gunn and Peter Safran
That is
got their
true,
current
yes.
jobs. So I don't even like, it might just be like a legacy project that the folks over at Max were always involved in, and so they have continued to stay involved, and rather than just completely handing it over, and maybe that's not going to be the case for anything that kind of comes out of the Batman universe in the future. Like, there's another Gotham Central, Gotham Police Department, Gotham GCPD show that's in
I think
development.
that evolved into an Arkham show, actually.
I
It was supposed to be Gotham PD, but then
Yeah,
I think it evolved into an Arkham show because last time I checked, it was untitled Arkham series. So it
which
might be who knows
we
with
don't know
that
where
because
that's
that
gonna go. But I mean, like,
yeah
but tell me, like, what do you think about this? Is this basically us harkening back to an era, a bygone era that we would like to not go back to, where
yeah.
there were too many cooks in the kitchen at DC? Or is this just a matter of, this is this one particular instance where this is a legacy property? And by legacy, I mean, the show isn't out yet. It's not legacy in the sense that, oh, it's been
Right.
out a while. It's in the sense that it was commissioned before DC Studios even existed. Like, is this just one of those kind of weird scenarios where it's a crossover because of how things were set up? Or is it more of an indication of a long-term problem that's continuing on with this new era of DC?
I think I think it might hopefully. I think well first obviously we both of us said in terms of the variety article is take that with a grain of salt. None of the sources were real sources. It was pretty much like the source was trust me, bro. I swear this is all true. So moving on from
Yeah.
that and the fact that this was kind of leeching off of that, it's like taking it with the smallest grain of salt you could possibly find. But even then, talking about that idea in terms of Zaslav maybe being in the cookie jar more than we want him to, and that kind of thing. The fact that it's with the Penguin show shows there's a little bit more hope because that is from before Gunn and Safran really got onto it. Hey, Safran was a producer for
Right.
the longest time for DC,
A
so
lot of
I
DC
think there's
projects. Yeah.
right. So I think there is some hope there that I think maybe that is just like its own thing. The fact it's part of the Batman and not the DCU. Again, there's more hope there. So I'd like to think that that's just its own thing and it's not like the all encompassing. Because again, if it is the all encompassing, if it is Gunn and Safran not having as much creative control, that is really a huge problem. That would be a huge problem because it's just like once again, WB not learning from their mistakes. It's just them being way too like having their fingers in everything when they should just let creative voices do their own thing, whether that be Gun, Mangold for Swamp Thing, or um, whoever they get for other projects, just let them do their thing. These are very talented, creative voices, and I think they should just let them do their own thing while obviously having some sort of net to like have everything conjoined and kind of feel like a similar tone. But I feel like hopefully it's just the Batman. It was because of Gunn and Safran not being coming in until later. Let's hope for that and not have it be another revolving door of executives just getting way too invested in this and not letting creative voices speak what kind of Marvel has become nowadays with like just everything feeling way too much of the same. None of these new directors and writers they're bringing in feeling like they have a voice and it just becoming the same stuff over and over again because DC has that leg up that they can let creative voices speak for themselves. And I do hope that that is something that Gunn and Safran will rely on in the future. And this is just like a small little side thing that they're just going to let them do their own thing because of a separate universe and a separate like thing going on. So I think that
Yeah.
that's what we'll look forward to.
Yeah, and let's be clear about this, right? Like, here's the quote from, like, from the article in Variety. It's not really a quote, it's just like the paragraph, if you will, in the article.
Hmm.
And in there, like, they talk about how, um there has been some confusion on the series front about who is the ultimate gatekeeper. Now, let's just think about this for a second because on the series front, we right now have a few things that are sort of confirmed. I know that they've announced a bunch of stuff, like they're gonna have a Booster Gold show, and they're gonna have a Waller series, and they're doing a new season of Peacemaker, which um, we assume won't have any connections to the old DCEU, and like season one sort of is its own thing that's gonna die with the DCEU, and season two is sort of like a like a Daredevil Born Again situation where you may kind of imagine similar events having played out in a headcanon version of season one of Peacemaker, but this would be like a new
Mhm,
Peacemaker show. So they will probably try to visually distinguish it in some ways. Maybe the intro is different. Maybe Peacemaker dresses a little differently. Maybe Vigilante's attire is different. Maybe John Economos or like any of those other characters that are coming over will look and feel and maybe talk a little differently. Maybe the locations will be different. But ultimately, like we don't have like you can probably count them on one hand the amount of shows that are been announced as part of the new DCU. And then we talked about like this all the Matt Reeves stuff. There's one show that was in production which was shut down due to the actor strike, and who knows how long that actor strike is going to go on for. And until it doesn't end, until it ends, I should say, we won't have
mhm.
a resumption on the Penguin series. So what was originally meant to come out, I believe, in 2024, will probably get pushed to 2025 at the bare minimum. So out of all of those shows that I've talked about, the Penguin was the farthest along. Even like that GCPD slash Arkham show that we were talking about, the other spinoff of the Batman, even that, like, I don't think has gone past the development stage. And other than maybe Peacemaker, which James Gunn has said that he's, has started to write again now that the writer strike is over, and the Superman legacy script is already done. Outside of those two things, none of the other shows are sort of in any meaningful level of production beyond like the pre-pro. And even pre-pro, like pre-production is something that you would consider more casting. Let's get the sets built, let's start to scout locations, that stuff. Whereas I think right now a lot of these shows are just being written, and maybe even not even just being written, but they're throwing pitches around and reconcepting things because that Arkham show has changed identities a few times. All of that to say, when they talk about this, that there's been some confusion, I'd like to think that this collaboration between Max and the DC team, aka DC Studios, with Peter Safran and James Gunn, and then on the Max side, you've got Sarah Aubrey and Casey Bloys, who, by the way, those HBO people are they know a thing or two about making good TV. Let's be honest. Like, if you look at the top 5 TV shows of all time in most people's lists, maybe on average 3 of those shows will be HBO shows, if not more. I bet you there's a lot of people whose top 5 is entirely consists of HBO shows. So if they are collaborating, and here's the thing, none of these 4 people that we've mentioned here, none of the none, not Aubrey, not Blois, not Saffron, maybe Gunn, but like in this case, I don't even think he counts as a creative voice, other than maybe some overarching elements like, hey, maybe don't use that storyline because maybe we're going to do that in the DCU with Batman Brave and the Bold, so we don't want to do that twice, something like that. But outside of that, he's not really going to be the creative lead. I think Matt Reeves is the one who's really taking the charge, much like James Gunn is like the creative lead behind, like the showrunner almost of, or I think he was a showrunner of Peacemaker. So Matt Reeves is doing kind of in the same role with the Penguin. So that collaboration is probably just at the business level for the most part. Maybe the budgets and how things are being done, just oversight purposes. Maybe they give some notes on like dailies and stuff like that. Which that level of studios involvement is normal. Like Marvel Studios, like they give.
Right.
I'm sure they give like a ton of notes. Kevin Feige is involved end to end on every, or he used to be until like the Disney Plus came around and like he was stretched too thin. But I think they're trying to get back to that because they've noticed that there's been a downtrend in quality as a result of Kevin Feige being stretched too thin. So we know that that kind of involvement is normal, like where they're getting studio executive notes, but I don't think that automatically means that we've got too many cooks in the kitchen. And like we
Right.
addressed this the other day, I can guarantee you, like if you look at this paragraph, that it's it's making a whole lot out of nothing. Like
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
is. Like the show, it's I and to be quite frank, like if the show fails and it sucks, which I highly doubt it would, considering the creative people that are involved in this, whether it's Colin
Exactly.
Farrell, who's playing the penguin, who doesn't even look like himself when he is like all in that makeup and prosthetics, or Matt Reeves behind the scenes, or I'm sure a number of the actors from the Batman who are going to reprise their roles. Maybe we'll even get Robert Pattinson to cameo in the show. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, and then when you look at the fact that this show has a pedigree of HBO, which now I know it's Max and then blah 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 blah, but HBO basically, that's the lineage this is a part of. I think we can put our trust in this, that they know what they're doing, and this
Right.
is just gossip level stuff that I just,
Yeah.
like I
We can
said,
only hope. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't even think it belongs in that article because
Yeah. I mean, that
for
was again, that was the whole discussion. Like, it was all hearsay. It was all like, oh, this could maybe this, maybe this, maybe this. And I was like,
yeah.
all right, come on.
Yeah, almost like, you're having a conversation with some like a bunch of people who maybe are in the know somewhat, like or people who work at Warner Brothers or other people like on your staff at Variety, and then you just decide to put that in the article. Like, oh, by the way, we were kind of sitting around in our lunchroom talking about this, and there's some confusion amongst us. I'm like, so like that doesn't automatically mean that there's an actual problem. You know what I mean? So okay, I think this is one of those things where if you come across this articles kind of saying or poking at the fact that this might be basically DC not learning from their past mistakes, I'm telling you this is not what's going on here.
Yeah.
And if that was going on, we would notice that in other places. And a lot of those instances are yet to come because so much of the new DCU has not done even, not, they haven't even put pen to paper on so much of it. I mean, they've got a plan. I'm sure they've, probably written out some character arcs and stuff like that. I'm sure they have stuff there. But as far as like scripts, as far as like locations, we don't even know a lot of, like, we don't know who the new Batman is going to be. We don't know who the new Joker is going to be. We don't know who Wonder Woman, whether it's Gal Gadot or somebody else. We don't know if Jason Momoa is coming back and whether it's Lobo or Aquaman. We don't know. Like, there's so much unknown and so much is stuck because of the actor strike that what we're talking about here is basically, people blowing something out of proportion. So, guys, let us know in the comments below what you think about this. I personally don't think this is a problem that we need to worry about. Certainly
Yeah. I
not
don't think
yet.
it should be either.
Like, and I highly doubt that the Penguin series is going to not be good. Like that show, we got some behind the scenes footage of it a year ago, and it looked freaking fantastic. So I can only imagine, like, if we are to compare to the aesthetic of the Batman, how good it's gonna look, and knowing Matt Reeves and how good of a job he did with the script and story of the Batman, I can only imagine how good the story and the episode to episode drama, intensity, and action, and all of the dialogue and everything. Colin Farrell's Penguin might be the best like live action iteration of all time. So, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about this, and of course, like and subscribe for more content like this. We're back here on DC Daily each and every day talking about more stuff, all from the world of DC and so much more. So keep checking back here for all things DC.